Hey!
Oh wow, we're live.
Finally! Apologies for the delay. We were trying to find a space to do the transmission.
Yeah, and there were also some technical issues, no? We wanted to find a spot that is quiet, but we have thousands of people here in Bonn, Germany for the climate conference, but a spot that would also give us pretty good internet connection. So it was quite challenging, but we're here now.
Finally!
So it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
Where have you been?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember anymore. Time just flies when you're trying to save the world. So, how are you?
I'm drained. Well, we have to let the audience know this is the final day of the climate change negotiations here in Bonn. So it's been 2 weeks, very intense. Yesterday I got home around midnight,
Hmm.
and well, we're still waiting. At least one document is still open. So we're waiting for the plenary. Supposedly it was going to happen now, but
Yeah, it's supposed to happen at 3 p.m., but now
yes,
it's been moved to 5 p.m. So it's like we'll just be hanging around here waiting when they will finally announce when the closing plenary will happen.
yes,
Yeah, because I heard that there's still not an agreement, no, in the negotiations on the Santiago network.
yeah, that's the one that's
Yeah,
open.
so maybe let's talk to them later about those things. But
Yeah.
I think, what's your impression? Has it been a good SP session or a shit show?
It has been tough, uh, especially because I don't know if you know about protocol, but something really weird happened with the protocol of the opening agenda, and that's been dragged during the
Until
entire
today,
two
until yesterday,
until
no? Yeah.
yesterday. Yes, come.
Yay!
We have guests.
Come, join
Hello,
us.
everybody.
So,
Why
who
don't
are you?
Oh,
yes?
so nice to meet you all, Gaia Sriskanthan. Have a pleasure of working with Tatet at Rosa Luxemburg Foundation.
Yeah, so
Welcome.
she's also been following the climate negotiations here for about 2 weeks.
hmm
This is her first second SB session, no?
But my first Despise Girls show, so I'm very honored to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, we were explaining and telling the audience what happened with the agenda. On the first day, the plenary needs to agree on an agenda, but developing countries suggested to include a new item related to the mitigation work program, which was based on finance. But then, given that they didn't follow the protocol to include all of the items in the agenda in May, then it was too late. So there was really a political debate that dragged until yesterday, in which they agreed that there's going to be some informal notes from the mitigation work
Mm.
program that indeed happened. But without closing the agenda, there was risk that all of the work that we did in the past 2 weeks would go to a waste, and we would have to start all over in the COP
In Dubai.
in Dubai. So that was really bad. So, well, in the end, we're happy that we have an agenda, and therefore all of the documents that were draft conclusions, etc., will be turned to the COP, and we will be able to take that as a basis for further negotiations. It's a lot of protocol, but you needed to know it's part of the deal.
But actually, those protocols, it may seem procedural, but it's actually very political. No, so it's like what they can't even agree on an agenda. It seems so flimsy, but the backstory is where the political debates were
Mm.
happening.
Yeah.
It's like what's allowed to be discussed and what's not, and
Mm.
what gets added.
Yeah, like for instance, on they were supposed to approve the agenda on the mitigation,
Work program.
the responsibility of countries to contribute to lowering greenhouse gas emissions. It did not get approved until yesterday because the developing countries were saying we can't talk about mitigation without discussing finance.
Yep.
So if you were new to this process, you would think, why are developing countries being so hard? It's like everybody has to mitigate and address climate change. Why are they making such a big fuss around the issue of finance? That's your segue, dear. finance.
Oh, I'm looking at your Despise Girls t-shirt. I also brought it. Now you have
I
to
think you
keep
should stand
on.
up and show it.
Yeah, I wore this morning at the Civil Society Action.
So we're very random, you know. Gaia's gonna tell us something while I wear on my Despise Girls
What am I going
t-shirt.
to tell you about
Why
climate
don't you tell us
finance?
about the corporate capture debate that has been
Mm.
happening here with the fossil fuels industry?
That's been really spicy. So I think it's in the last two COPs we've seen this rise in the number of corporate representatives in the COP process and in the SB, and so there's a big pushback from also. I don't want to take airtime away from the T-shirt. That's what's really important.
No, but please.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the WHO negotiated a tobacco convention. They didn't let tobacco companies into the negotiation of that. They clearly have a conflict of interest here.
Yeah.
And we think the same principle should apply to the fossil fuel industry. But there's obviously a lot of pushback there. But there have been some great organizations that have come together and they're really pushing back against that under the Kick Big Polluters Out campaign. Check that out online. It's really a great campaign. And they've been doing an inside outside kind of strategy where they've had mobilizations, they've had a campaign, and they've been releasing data on how many fossil fuel companies are in the room in each successive COP. And there have also been some interesting discussions with the Secretariat as well that have been ongoing for, I think, probably a couple of years at this point, about getting a conflict of interest policy.
Yeah.
So that, if you come to the COPs, if you're negotiating, we want to know who's paying for you to be there. We want to know who you're representing, and guess what?
Mm. We have
We
this
are not.
nice stickers.
Yes.
It says not paid for by the fossil fuel industry. So that's part of our little advocacy work here to make sure that people know that we are not here on speaking or protecting the interests of the fossil fuel
I
industry.
never got that rounded. I have this one, but not this one.
Yeah,
So
but
that's a state of play there, and I think it's still an open question, and it's still a long fight ahead to get a basic thing like a basic logical thing like that
and
implemented.
particularly since the president of the COP28 in Dubai, they've appointed the CEO of a fossil fuel company. So it's like, it's so fundamental, it's so basic, it's so obvious. You don't let somebody representing the interests of the fossil fuel industry, the largest polluters, the ones most responsible for climate change, to lead the negotiations on addressing climate change. So it's like it doesn't take a genius, but somehow the logic is lost in
Yeah.
this space. No.
I also wanted to use this opportunity because if you recall, after the COP in Egypt, the Spice Girls came and told you about the situations of harassment, of surveillance, of the violations on the political rights, the rights to assembly, the right to protest, the rights of expression, etc. So it was a really hostile environment. It was really scary when we were there. And so here, there has been a negotiation that has been parallel to the substantive things, but is at the core of the concerns of civil society and social movements, which is to ensure the safety of those who are engaging before, during, and after a COP and every UNFCCC event. It has been a very painful negotiation
Yeah.
because for the first time, it used to be protocol like, oh, okay, which party is gonna host the COP, like what are the procedimental issues about
Do you have capacity? What are the
Yeah.
arrangements?
and how's the speaking roles are gonna play, etc. But in this occasion, um, just gonna tell you how the issue of sexual harassment came up very prominently in these negotiations, and that was the key driver of the sexual harassment of women who are also fighting for these agendas and who attended the COP in Egypt and who suffered many situations that nobody should ever face. And that was the main driver to agree on, I think, the most progressive language in the history of the UNFCCC. We have references to human rights and international law. We have reference, of course, to right to assembly, all of the political and social rights, but also the right of protection and condemnation on sexual harassment, on harassment, specifically as well on sexual harassment. And this battle was fought very proudly by Mexico. I just want to say, yes, that
Yes.
we have to recognize that, because they were left mostly alone during these 2 weeks negotiations, and they stood very strongly in defending the integrity not only of all observers, not only of all social movements engaging here, but also addressing very strongly the issues on sexual harassment. And let me tell you, it was very tough, because delegates in the room from other countries were saying, well, if there are 2,000 people here, of course a woman is going to be harassed, no? Or they were actually undermining, saying, oh, well, that may be a subjective impression, or that may be
It's just your
your
personal.
personal
Yeah.
subjectivity, undermining, gaslighting, and again, re-victimizing women and not believing what they say. So it has been really tough. It has been really tough. And in the end, I think putting at the forefront of the discussion the issue of sexual harassment made the parties realize that this is something that you cannot really undermine. And so all of the strength of the language in regards to all of the political and civil rights were pushed by this driver of the rights of women to live a life free of violence. So just wanted to report on that, because it may sound secondary. Nobody is gonna know what happened here, but we were there, we saw it, and of course we have many testimonies of human rights defenders, of many women who came here who felt as unsafe as we did. And now finally we will have a document towards, not only towards Dubai, but towards the rest of the COPs, in which our rights are going to be ensured.
That's true. So this is a major outcome
Major.
of this intercessional, no? But it's it's so painful.
It was really painful.
It was painful.
really
It
painful.
was difficult, because you see a lot of the member states who say they are for gender equality, women's human rights, they did not speak up at
Yeah.
the time when it counted the most.
Yes.
So it was Mexico who was really championing,
Yeah.
but it had to be at the painful cost of recounting their personal experience, of sexual harassment, etc. in Egypt, for the others to wake up. So that's how institutionalized, I don't know, it's institutionalized sexism.
Yes.
It's
A
misogyny
naturalization of sexual gender-based violence. Yeah.
And minimization of it as well, and
Yeah.
minimization of individual experiences, and saying, oh, it doesn't count if it's just a handful of women, or trying to sort of
Yeah.
downplay it.
I guess to me it's really the leading agenda of so many defenders, women defenders, that are out there suffering the same kind of harassment than men, plus with this added value on having faced sexual harassment and many other situations. So this was really important. And I also wanted to highlight that it is important. Another gain for the civil society is that during plenaries, we usually have all of the parties, all of the member states stating their positions, etc., discussing. And so until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, when the plenary is over, everybody has left. That's the term for observers to speak in the plenary. And for the first time, agreed in this document, after speaking the main negotiating groups, which would be like what, 12?
Yeah.
12. Then after that, there's going to be a rotation observers and one member state observers and one member state. So that means that at the beginning of the plenary, all of the civil society observers will get to have their messages. People with disability, the environmental movements, the feminist movements, trade unions, etc., will get to say their messages in the plenary, and everybody will listen, which is more importantly. So yes, we're very happy about that. And we have another guest.
We're very lucky that the plenary sessions got pushed, so that people now are just here and have some time to be with us in these discussions.
in the important
So,
discussions.
in the important discussion. So, can you please introduce yourself to our friends who are watching us?
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Amali Tower. I'm the founder and executive director of Climate Refugees, and such an honor to be with friends here.
Great to have you.
Gaia, they can see you. Come on,
Oh,
come on.
that's
Let's
fine.
move.
Yes,
Let's
let's
move.
go.
There you go.
There we go. We're both in there.
Yeah.
So tell us, what issues are you interested here in Bonn?
Um, the loss and damage
Yes.
conversation.
Tell us.
Well, I would say that loss and damage is principally an issue of justice. And as someone who's working on climate as a driver of forced migration and forced displacement, unfortunately, since this isn't a standalone topic or even recognized as an issue of climate justice, it's really the only place in which, within the confines of the frameworks we do have, the only place that it's really picked up any sort of momentum is in loss and damage. In understanding that displacement is a form of non-economic loss and damage. So this is why we're following this, so that we can basically see what kind of practical support, technical assistance, financial support, but also can it be a way and a bridge for even legal solutions for people who might find themselves even cross-border displaced, right? Not just in their countries, but have to go and seek assistance. Will this become a protection issue? These are all things that need to be examined closer. And it's really unclear, like, where in the UN system there's capacity to really bring that forth in this very siloed system, right?
Yeah.
So, folks might remember that in COP27, I can't see myself. That we came out from COP27 quite happy because we won, that loss and damage fund. So here in these sessions, supposedly they're moving closer, 2 steps closer to actually agreeing on, talking about the funding arrangements, but also about the loss and damage fund in itself. However, over the last 2 weeks, it's quite frustrating, but it's expected. You win something huge there. You win something huge in Egypt, but then getting to the part where you actually get to operationalize this thing, it's becoming harder and harder. For instance, you hear the rich countries, the developed countries are saying, climate change is a global problem, so everyone should be contributing to it, referring to, their desire not to be accountable or legally responsible to put money into the loss and damage fund. Or you hear rich countries saying, loss and damage is not even a principle or a goal of the Paris Agreement, or that common but differentiated responsibility, it's not a principle. So they're seriously pushing back aggressively on all of those hard-won gains that we had in Charm, and I'm just really concerned that we might have a loss and damage fund without any money in it, or we might not have a standalone loss and damage fund and it's just going to be annexed to some other bank.
Yeah, there are two options on the table. One is the Caribbean Development Bank to host the loss and damage fund, and the other is the DRR.
It's the Santiago Network
Yeah.
providing technical assistance. It's not really the loss and damage fund
The
yet.
Santiago
Yeah.
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 But that's also the thing. I think the running theme here is they're handing everything over to the multilateral banks.
Yeah.
Whether it's for technical assistance or whether it's for the loss and damage. And I think it ties in very, smoothly or not smoothly in the discussions around a new collective finance goal. And Emilia's been following that. So how's the ambition on that finance goal?
No, we're not discussing ambition. It was a very technical conversation. It was really interesting because it was more about what would be the methodologies that we can use to reach a quantum goal. For instance, are we going to come up with a figure, Copenhagen? That suggested we don't want to be Copenhagen again. Well, that's one option on the table, just coming out with a figure,
with a random
a
figure.
random
Yeah.
figure. The other element is, well, there are many options, right? Another could be doing something based based on needs, based in science, etc. Um, so there were many discussions around how to achieve a goal. Are we gonna do it based on the NDCs needs that are out there? Because the national determined contributions are the voluntary pledges that countries are saying this is gonna be using for mitigation, for adaptation, etc. And they have some estimates on the the funding needs that they are requiring. So that's another option on the NDCs, and they need to review the NDCs based on how to achieve the goal, etc. So that's a conversation. Another conversation is about the sources of funding. For instance, in the biodiversity discussion, they also achieved to a goal, 200 billion per year, and that includes also national funding, not only international funding, unlike the $100 billion agreed here in Copenhagen, which is only referring to international finance. In the case of the biodiversity, they're also considering how much countries are gonna bring in their own funding with public funding, etc. So another issue is it going to be public, private? Are we going to bring in philanthropy? Are we going to, how are the MDBs, the multilateral development banks, are going to be engaged? So there are many issues around sources of funding. And finally, the third issue that we discussed was, there's a new, this debate that is quite technical, but not. What is the relation of the climate finance within the UNFCCC with the broader financial architecture that is stated in one article that is very particular, that is 2.1c, as opposed to the Article 9
heard it first
in the
here,
Article
folks.
of Paris? Yes, you heard it here first.
2.1c, if you want to sound geeky.
Yeah.
Hashtag 2.1c.
Well, you want to sound geeky and then use the most horrible metaphors, because in the new collective quantifiable goals we were discussing a metaphor that the EU were proposing about an onion. So they said it can be like an onion, at the core, public funding for climate finance, etc. And then we add layers like private finance, and then the MDBs and stuff, and that would be
And then
like
It
an
makes
onion.
us cry. The onion will make us cry.
And then another country said, no, it's not like an onion, it's rather like a sausage roll, because then
I think that
the
was New
meat is mixed with several types of things, and then you have the pastry, and sometimes the pastry is really overwhelming and it has a lot, and sometimes the meat is not so strong.
You have to teach them about poetry. They suck.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to everybody listening, and this is literally the level of debate that's going on with climate. We're talking about onions and sausage rolls.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, the world is safe.
At least Liana Shalatek with the Bird Foundation in the session, she said, well, maybe it would be better to talk about vegetable soup and bringing more veggies and more nice, healthy things. So, well, at least she wanted to make it more healthy. So I was like,
It's insane.
so yeah, that's
the
you
level.
heard it here first too. Not only the geeky things, but the onions and
Yeah,
the
I
sausage
also
roll.
heard something like coming from the next hosts, and I won't say, but we all know who the next hosts are. It said, climate finance is like being invited to come to a buffet at 9 p.m. So you go there at 9 p.m., but realizing that the others have been there and eating since 8 p.m. And then when the bill comes, they ask you to
Split it.
split it. So that's not fair, I said.
I'd also like to add that a lot of the negotiators are very hungry, and this is really reflecting in their obsession with food analogies. So let's cut them a little slack there, shall we? All right.
But in a way, I appreciated that analogy
Yes.
because it's about
It's a good one.
historical responsibility.
It's true. It's
no?
true. At least that one was a good
Yeah,
one.
so those countries who have historically polluted, those who ate at 8 p.m., and the current polluters, those who came in at 9 p.m., they can't split the bill equally.
So this is Australia's argument. They think they came in at 8 p.m.
Why are you shouting?
Sorry, sorry. I think I'm
She's
being,
upset.
I am angry at Australia. So they think they came in at 8 p.m. but didn't realize they had to pay the bill, and they started eating, and therefore, because they didn't know before 9 p.m. that they had to pay the bill, they should just pay the same as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basically what they said in a session was, oh, any emissions before the time we knew 100% that climate change was an issue, we didn't know what we were doing. We were just burning fossil fuels, and we thought it was safe.
Oops.
So we shouldn't. Whoopsie, sorry
Oh
about that.
gosh, I
So,
wasn't
yeah.
informed.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to check in with the oil companies that have been hiding information that governments may
that's
have
a
known
good
about? I think that
Mhm.
goes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it the 70s?
I think
70s.
so.
Yeah, yeah.
77 stands
Yeah.
out in my mind. Australia.
Yeah. But then,
United
of course,
States.
all the global north countries are like, we agree with Australia on that point. No
course.
historical responsibility.
It's just the current emissions, which means it's China, India.
Right, exactly. As if the current emitters have, the same weight as anyone with historical emissions, who, by the way, aren't mitigating currently anyway. So it's like pot calling the kettle black, even if you want to bring up this. What about you, China? What about you, India? Hang on. What about other middle to high income countries with growing economies? It's exactly as you were saying, Titet. It's to push. This is how you invalidate the common but differentiated responsibilities principle, an international legal principle. And this is how you do it. You throw your weight around.
So there's been, the usual tracks: mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage. We have a new track on just transition. That is also really important, not necessarily at the same level of others, but it also brings the question on how to bring about, the entire societal transformation that is required. There weren't too many. I mean, it was just the first dialogue, so the outcomes are still very general. From my feminist view, we really need to bring the gender perspective into it, because that is the macro economic point of entry to the issue unpaid domestic and care work. I don't think it's really strong, that dimension, so that's something that we need to do. But at least it's garnered some momentum in this conversation, even more, I think, than other topics. And adaptation has been very heated in these
Gaia was
negotiations.
following some of the adaptation stuff.
I was not, sadly. Otherwise, I would love to tell you about it. I was following more the global stock take, which was where these outlandish comments
You
were.
want to tell the audience what is a global stock take?
Wouldn't I love to tell the audience? So the global stock take is essentially a process to decide on how we assess that we're meeting the Paris Agreement goals. And it sounds simple enough. It's like, duh, right?
It's inventory.
Yeah, it's like, how are we doing? But this is where these arguments are coming up, where they're like, yeah, we want to know how we're doing, but we only want to start at 2020 emissions. We don't want to look at emissions before then, which is where all of these things get a bit. Then that's a really big political issue, because the whole point of common but differentiated responsibilities is that some countries have done a lot more to cause the problem than others, but they want that wiped out of the register. So we're not counting that at all, right? Which really weakens the common but differentiated responsibilities principle. So there was a lot of discussion about what should be in the global stock take, so that issue, but they also just are sort of like addressing another thing that global South countries want is for finance to be properly addressed in that. So the idea is that developed countries should be paying for the transition in the global South, and they want that to be measured. So that every year, or whatever the reporting cycle period is, we know if global North countries are meeting their targets on finance as well. So there's a lot of argument about what should be included in that process.
But there was a huge gossip time.
Spill the tea.
No, it's not actually gossip, but it's an article from The Guardian that came out 2-3 days
Oh
ago.
yes, no, last
They have
week.
an expose about what these rich countries are claiming as climate finance. Like uh, X country, X rich country, let's just call them Italy,
Mm.
declared as climate finance. The money they use to support their local business to set up ice cream, no, gelato
Yes,
shops.
get it right, Ted.
No, it's not ice
It's
cream.
gelateria.
Gelato shops everywhere.
Superior.
It's a franchise. And they claimed it as climate finance. I think Japan was also giving
Funding a
money for
mining
coal, no, for
coal.
Bangladesh. It's like, and the US for a chain of hotels or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some hotels, I
Yeah.
think.
And chocolate.
Chocolate factory.
Chocolateria.
Something about chocolate.
So that's the
The
point.
point being,
Yeah.
not really climate related.
I mean,
But there
spot the
is
difference.
Yeah.
there is really no mechanism because it's a self-reporting thing.
Mhm.
What countries report as climate finance support gets counted as climate finance, no matter how you know absurd it may sound. But that gelato shops counted as climate finance contributions of uh, of rich countries.
There's a debate here about what is the definition of climate finance,
Mm.
and there's going to be discussed in a negotiation about, yeah, is climate finance something that happens in NDCs because that is the main point of implementation, or is it something else? And in NDCs, any country decides what is going to be climate finance. So some countries are even reporting fossil fuels, and that should be counted as climate finance. Others say no, it has to be a definition that is based on scientific criteria, and then we're gonna have to decide on that. So that's also a debate that is happening here. It's gonna take a while, but you can see how problematic it is, and it's also how political. It's not only about uh, an abstract definition. It has at the core the very same foundation that we want to influence.
That's why it's important to have that, monitoring, reporting, and verification system because we can't let them get away with declaring any other expense as climate finance support,
Well, I mean, they're proceeding as if this is the honor system in some prestigious, boarding school. I mean, think about it. Without what you were just saying, without some kind of verification methodology, we're just supposed to, take you at your word that some gelateria is achieving net zero.
It's adapting. It's an adaptation
Right,
mechanism. No, I'm just
exactly.
kidding. It's not adaptation, of course.
If it's the weather is getting warmer, you need
Mm.
ice cream.
Yeah,
Everybody
think about it,
knows
folks.
it.
Think about
Yeah,
it.
brilliant point. I've been schooled.
But that's really insane.
It is
no?
insane.
It's insane because developing countries, communities, population groups are already struggling to keep their heads
Yes.
above the water, and then we get very little in terms of climate finance. And then now you see this report. Countries are making a mockery of this situation and of this process, I guess. No.
Well, can we also talk to Tete about the point that if you even have the capacity to apply for climate finance, I mean, how many countries, because of how onerous and like absolutely odious the process to even apply for climate finance. So it's almost like you have all these barriers, whether it's capital expenditure barriers, human capacity barriers. Many countries will say they can't even access such a complicated process to even like actually literally put in an application. So it's not, I mean, we can speak about high principles like transparency and accountability and all these things, but it's simply not even accessible, for people to apply to even be considered. And then when they are considered, it's such a long process for you to even like go through the verification and the interview stage and like prove your worthiness. And then I don't know. I mean,
You
like,
get
years
loans.
can go by. You get loans.
You don't
not
get grants. That's the thing. Climate finance has largely been loans.
Yeah, it's a very asymmetrical system.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us into talking about the multilateral development banks and the
Mhm.
increased role that's being put for them in climate finance, right? Because we're seeing this increasing, basically none of the global north countries want to put public finance in. They don't want to rock the boat with their tax havens and their tax loopholes, and they don't want to like make the rich in their part of the world pay more. So they're like, well, let's let the multilateral development banks take care of everything. They can just give us more loans, and loans at better rates, but still loans. And this is a real problem from countries that have, after the pandemic, they're in massive debt distress, and they're now being told that to adapt to climate change, they have to take more loans on top of that.
And countries who are coming out from the economic impacts of the pandemic while also being battered by climate disasters. And so you look at especially the small island developing states who have, came forth and have been asking for debt relief because they can't, it's not an equal playing field, right? We might have all been in the pandemic boat together, but was everybody equally affected? No.
I think you should come closer because you
Yeah.
are all very dark.
Yeah,
Or
it's the light in
shadows.
here.
Shadows.
Well, it kind of goes with the UN. Very little light in here.
It's very
We've been in a
ghastly here.
basement for days.
It's a metaphor from
Yeah.
how the conversations go as well.
They
right?
keep us locked in here.
Yeah.
Help,
In the
help.
dungeon.
And it's crazy, it's like outside, it's nice and sunny. Here, the ACs are blasting, It's
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, they really want us
If
to
they
get
even
sick.
work.
If they
Yeah, exactly.
So, what gave you hope for this 2 weeks?
I was really inspired by the discussion on the conditions for future COPs, especially women putting themselves out there, standing in full solidarity with them. But what came out of it is really strong, and I think that should be an inspiration for us all. What we had was not a technical win; it was definitely a movement's win, and that's really something that we needed to be highlighted.
Well, I hope for Dubai and Bonn that
We were terrified.
We
We
like to
lost
enhance
you.
the drama.
I think we left it to texting sophisticated.
internet. Yeah, but it was really huge, no? And I think for me, what gave me hope was that you really see how hard civil society and grassroots organizations who are able to access this space, how hard we keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But also because we realize that the space is really not friendly and not really open for us. There's a lot of coordination happening to make our actions louder, bolder. Yeah.
Can I say something in that? For our next episode of the Despise Girls, not here, there was some data
Mm-hmm.
that was released that 65%, I think, of the civil society that comes to COPs are from the global north, and only a minimum portion of the global south.
On the global side.
And so, regardless of what the political implications are for leaving the door open for anyone who wants to participate and stuff, I have an opinion on that.
Of course you do.
I have an opinion. We don't have the time to discuss it, but this is something that we need to take ownership of what the situation about observers, because no, I'm not gonna keep on going. I just say this is something that we're gonna be
Stay
addressing
tuned.
in a next episode of this telenovela with the Despise Girls. We cannot just leave this left unaddressed.
Here, here. Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, so what gave you hope
What gave
of
me
this
hope?
session?
I'll tell you two things. One is on the costs or on these processes. It was nice to see that, at least from my vantage, but also confirmed from others who don't work in migration or displacement, that finally this topic has seemed to have like registered and maybe landed, like even found a lane. And when I say landed, I mean, if you want anything to happen in the multilateral space, it has to have its own lane, right? And I feel like that has finally happened. Very much in hand with how long that it's taken for that to even a very obvious human impact, by the way, or climate impact, how long that it's taken for that to come alive here. I don't want to give credit to anybody. It's really the climate tipping points that have made it so impossible to deny. So if it's landed, it's only because of actually negative forces that have brought it here. To take nothing away from civil society that has been working on it, which takes me to my next point. To show you, to demonstrate to you how little emphasis, attention, holistic thinking there is in this space, and why maybe this has taken so long to arrive as a conversation point, I'm very pleased on a personal note to be here for the first time funded. Because of the reticence to discuss about climate impacts on human beings, primarily in the global south, who are Black and brown people, there's no funding space. How do you determine policy? You by governments, right? You have to say this is an important matter of principle of foreign policy to you. How do you actually actualize that? Well, you fund that work. So it should tell you a lot when there's no funding space for something. It's because it's not a priority. It's not a political priority. So if I'm here after now almost 9 years of trying to bring attention to this issue for the first time because some donor finally recognizes it, it's because the climate tipping points are actually pushing them to, take notice. Because I'd love to say that we've been powerful and I'm not discounting anything we've done. But that's what we're up against, a lack of concern and attention, and the climate that is just encroaching upon and disproportionately impacting the poorest, marginalized people on the planet who aren't here to.
And the question, who gets funded?
Who gets funded?
For the next episode of the Despise Girls.
Yeah, so now that this topic is landed, and to Amelia's earlier point about, wait for it, teaser, if 65% of the people here are global north, how are you going to represent? Who are the constituencies of people who are displaced? Are they here? Hello? No, it's a big echo. They're the people who should be here,
If we are going to have a majority of governors, we need to see them in action. We need to see them doing their work. That's the major question. Okay, Gaia, what gives you hope?
That's a tough question. It's
like I'm fully depressed here.
it's been rough in there. I haven't even seen a sausage roll. So like, what's been positive? I think it has been good to see civil society and the amount of actions that have happened. This morning we saw Tetet do a original rap piece outside of the conference hall.
Next episode.
So there's been very good coordinated resistance. Also, bringing it back to that issue on kicking out big polluters from the climate talks, there was a very good cross-constituency effort to speak to the Secretariat about this at this time, and it was very strong and united. And I was very proud of our people here who were taking a stand against that. So I hope we can keep up the pressure. You should keep up the pressure too, because it has to come from outside as well. We cannot have polluters setting the terms of this. And you see the impact of that. You see that all these false solutions. What do the oil companies want? They want to extend their lifespan. So they're like, don't worry, we can capture carbon and we can store it. Or we can use geoengineering to blot out the sun and we'll be fine. We can just keep pumping this pollution. So it's really important for us to get them out. So let's keep up the pressure.
Yeah.
All right.
And we also have an NCQG song. NCQG is the new collective quantifiable goal, the finance goal, this new miraculous finance goal that's going to save the world. So we have the NCQG. So we need to
the
learn
tune of YMCA. Yeah. So hard. No?
The Q is so hard. How do you?
Is that also for the next episode? You'll have a dance worked out?
Yeah, we need to practice.
We'll practice that.
Chat's gonna teach. Yeah.
So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the work that you do.
Yeah.
The original Despise Girls.
I think this could be the greatest honor of my life.
It truly is.
Yes.
It truly
Well,
is.
now
An
you have-
honorary Despise Girls.
You have joined the club. Thank you so much for joining. We're gonna go and try to find out what happens with the plenary. But let's stay tuned for the next episode of Spice Girls. And Rina, we miss you.
We miss you, Rina. See you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.